Dithda Hadina Pabuni, the Bocasto MESKLA Brewyon Drudh, Ostis Genev Sove Berryman. Hello and welcome everyone to the MESKLA Brewyon Drudh podcasts, hosted by me, Sove Berryman. MESKLA Brewyon Drudh is a multi-platform project using sculpture making and conversation to explore contemporary Cornish cultural identity. Through workshops, podcasts, a symposium and an exhibition, the project invites people to share their experiences of identity and Cornwall, and their views on Cornish culture and its relationship to land, language, heritage, tourism, the Cornish diaspora and much, much more. These podcasts record conversations with guests whose research or lived experience touches on the project themes. The views, thoughts and opinions expressed are the speaker's own. All conversations are carried out with a spirit of generosity and openness, creating space for the discussions to twist and turn. And I'm very grateful to all who have taken part. For this 8th podcast, I invited Dr Joanie Willett to talk about socio-economic situations and lifestyle culture in Cornwall. And Joanie invited Natasha Carthew to join her in this conversation. Natasha Carthew is a working class writer from Cornwall. Her new book, Undercurrent, a Cornish Memoir of Poverty, Nature and Resilience, is a powerful exploration of rural poverty and a story of hope, beauty and fierce resilience. Undercurrent publishes with Coronet, Hodder and Stoughton in April 2023. Natasha is well known for writing on socio-economic issues and has written extensively on the subject of how authentic working class voices are represented in literature. She is founder and artistic director of the Working Class Writers Festival and the Nature Writing Prize for Working Class Writers in association with Octopus, Hachette. Joanie is a senior lecturer in politics with the University of Exeter and co-director of the Institute of Cornish Studies. Joanie's research about social and economic development in Cornwall is a deeply personal topic for her, beginning with an awareness that many of her contemporaries felt that there was little future in Cornwall for their children. Joanie begins our conversation. Govennic am burs, hui that lowenhei goes low as orto. I hope you enjoy listening.
Hi. First of all, I really want to say that thank you so much, Natasha, for agreeing to this, because I've been following your work for a little while and I really, really love it. And I'm very much looking forward to your next book. So I just wanted to start out really with asking you about what Cornwall means to you as a place and why it matters if it does.
Cornwall matters to me as a place, as a Cornish person, first and foremost. I'm born and raised here. I live here still, and really, as a place, it's in my heart. It's in my bones. It's the salt in my blood. Cornwall is what makes me. It's because where I grew up. It's because of my parents. It's everything really. So it's for me. It's really the foundation of me as well, and the foundation of me as a writer, and how far I've come, I suppose, in my career.
It's really interesting, isn't it, the way that the places that we grew up in and the kind of people that we're around, the kind of things the way that we create our own sense of meaning and stuff like that. It's really interesting how important that then becomes in how we then end up going and approaching the world as well. But you said that you're still living in Cornwall, and I'm really very much aware about how that lifestyle Cornwall was very middle class, and relies really heavily on having like a good solid income and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering about how you've managed to stay here, how you've managed to make it, keep it going. and to still be here.
Well,
despite
despite everything. I mean, so many people have had to move away, whether it's for work or because they can't afford to live here. For me, I'm very lucky because my partner has a proper job. She works in education, so she earns the lion's share. I mean, as a writer, we don't earn a lot anyway, even though no matter how big the next advance I get as a writer, when it comes back to, you work it out over the course of a couple of years, between hardback, paperback, all the payments are split up, obviously, so you end up with not a lot, and most writers are minimum wage, and I'm a successful writer. So for me, she has allowed me to live here in Cornwall in that respect. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to. And I still can't live anywhere near the village where I grew up. I live inland in southeast Cornwall. The village where I grew up houses, the average price is 700,000. So, and that for me is heartbreaking, because when I go and visit and I walk on the beach and I just see all these houses, I mean, to be fair, I kind of wouldn't want to live there now. It's a village called Downderry, and all the houses are so crammed together, and they have, their balconies are looking over each other, and it's just a mess of buildings, basically. So I can't live in the village where I grew up, where my family grew up, where my grandfather, great-grandfather, they were builders. They built the first affordable homes in the village. So for me, I'm in Cornwall, but I'm not perhaps by the sea where I was, born and raised. If I didn't have a partner who was getting a wage every month, then I probably wouldn't be able to live here. Or I'd be living on a caravan site where lots of us do, We are being pushed to, not to the perimeters, because that's the coast, we're being brought into the centre, and then a lot of us are having to move away, and then you can't get back. So, it's a kind of a fight. It's a fight for a lot of us to stay here and to be proud of being Cornish still, and without people thinking, oh yeah, but, you're not real, because sometimes people might think we're not, we're kind of mythological, I think, sometimes, us Cornish in Cornwall, because there's less and less of us. We move away and we're very proud, and we celebrate St. Piran's Day and we carry our flag, but still, to be Cornish in Cornwall is getting rarer and rarer, I think.
Do you mind? So one of the things that I've been noticing an awful lot over the past couple of years, especially, but it's all have been longer, I just wasn't really thinking about it at the time, that most of the groups of people that I'm around, I live in St Denis, so I live in the China Clay area, and I love it. When I grew up in North Cornwall, near Weybridge, and I knew of the Clay area as somewhere you didn't want to go to on during the daytime, let alone on the dark night. But actually, I've been here since 2000, which is really quite shocking, and I love it. It's great. Unless I'm around the village, which is still really quite very Cornish and very local. But in most other environments that I'm in Cornwall, I'm either the only or one of maybe two people who were raised in Cornwall. So my family moved here in the 50s. I grew up here and my dad grew up here. But I'm an enormous minority just having been raised here, rather than choosing to move here later on as an adult. I find that quite.
Yeah. And do you find that tourism still avoids the centre as well? Like tourists will go through, say, Austell area, Clay Country, as fast as they can on the way down. I find that quite strange, because Cornwall is so beautiful wherever you are, for different reasons. And I find that incredible, because they don't get to see the real people and the real culture when they rock up in St Ives or Padstow. They're then with each other, and half of them are all, and I love the world of publishing. I work in the world of publishing because of my festival, but still, I know they all go to the same places and they all bump into each other, which is just, it's crazy, because why would you want to have a holiday somewhere where you're all English, you're all from London, you're all white predominantly, it's kind of sad. And it's a shame they're not going to other areas like St Austell area, Clay Country.
Please don't get everybody.
Especially the village Carthew. I don't know if anyone knows Carthew, but that's...
I know Carthew.
Yeah, so that's where Wheel Martin is, so that's where my family 1,000 years ago or something crazy would have come from, I suppose. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned, I mean, there was loads of things there that I was just like nodding my head vigorously to, but one of the things you mentioned around people believing that you're Cornish or not. And I wonder if you notice that if you're in different spaces. I wondered if if you could pick up on that at all, this kind of perhaps fetishisation of what Cornish is.
One of the things that I've noticed about myself is that over the past couple of years, and I'm noticing that I'm not really using my accent very much right now. But if I'm around people who aren't Cornish, I bloody well do. And it's using dialect it's become really political for me. And at one point, when I first started teaching down in Penryn, so I'm a senior lecturer in politics for the University of Exeter at the campus in Penryn. When I first started teaching there, I always kind of tried to hide it, and I felt a little bit embarrassed actually about being Cornish, and I felt very strongly that I was imagined. Actually, it wasn't just that I felt it; I actually got this. This was reinforced as well. That people thought that, I don't know, I wasn't quite good enough. Or I use Cornwall a lot as a case study in my research, which isn't just about Cornwall, it's actually about rural areas more generally. But people then sort of pigeonhole me as being like, oh, okay, she just does work on Cornwall, so therefore it's not so good. So I was finding that I've definitely tried to talk much more proper than I might in other environments. Now I'm like, stop that. This is me, and actually I'm going to put on my accent specifically just for you all.
I think, we definitely put our accents on. Like, I find throughout the summer, whenever you go anywhere, there might be emmets, you always say, all right, as they pass, all right? And that, and they're like, oh, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? And you just, nah, gone. I do that and I really put it on my partner's like, oh, you really, it's almost like bullying, like on the cliff path, and you just say, all right, and if they say all right back, then that's it, It's almost like, yeah, you can pass, go on. Especially up here in South East Cornwall, because we're sitting close to the bridge. I'm always really protective of that bridge and who comes across. And, when the end of January comes and all the number plates, and I'm always just obsessed with where the number plates are coming from, it's mad. We've just got it in us to be kind of protective, but I think we are wanting to just protect where we are and where we're from. I know, talking about accents, a lot of work that I do as part of the Working Class Writers Festival is talk to people from all across the country, as you were saying about different rural communities. And it's so interesting in publishing how people try, and just even as writers, they try to downplay their accent because they think they're more likely to get a book deal, or they're more likely to get an agent or an editor when they go to festivals and they get to talk to people from the industry. And I just think that's just so sad, because whether it's a subconscious thing that people are actually prejudiced against people with accents or not, maybe they have something. Maybe people do take posher accents. Maybe they hear a posher accent and they're like, yeah, okay, you are one of us. Do you know what I mean? So that's really interesting.
If there's generally like a romanticising or stereotyping in people's minds of all sorts of different people with all different kinds of accents, and you can see these patterns through like TV. Like an accent from the northeast of England might be considered good for certain things, or I wonder sometimes about the keys that give access to, like, through the doors of, I don't know, prosperity or whatever, are more non-verbal than just an accent. That there's a whole host of ways of being that give access, and I wonder if either of you could talk a little bit about to like intangible culture? Like, are there aspects of Cornish culture that is intangible but is a way that is common in Cornwall or is important to our cultural identity? I mean, Natasha, you touched upon saying hello to people on the street and on the path.
I don't know. I think for me, Cornishness, being part of this place, is so deeply embedded in, I don't know, just like my understandings. I almost don't even really understand what some of that intangible stuff is. It's only really, I guess, a couple of months ago, I was in an environment with some people from other parts of Europe. And I didn't think that I was being particularly Cornish at all. I really didn't. And then this guy comes up to me and goes, "You are so Cornish." I was taught English by a Cornish person. And I was like, how am I being Cornish right now? I've got no idea. Turns out I was.
Yeah, I think people think that we're quite suspicious and, you know, wary of strangers and outsiders and stuff. And like, yeah, we are. You know, we're kind of an island community in many ways, you know, with the two seas and the river. We are quite insular at times, but that's fun. I like being like that. I like being a bit secretive because then, you know, people think they know you. They think that you're getting on and stuff, but, you know, we always keep a little bit back. But then when we do give that extra, then that person knows that they are trusted. And, you know, I think it's more special when we kind of let people in as Cornish folk, whereas other people might be more kind of frivolous and be all pally, and, you know, we're not like that. And I like that. I think that we are different. We are a Celtic nation. My partner's Irish. We are very similar in many ways. It's the same when we go over to Brittany. You know, we just have that, which is a little bit different from it's a lot different from the English, but I think we're very proud, and we will continue to be proud. But I just hope that our pride isn't just a quick tick box of the things, you know, the things that we're quickly proud of. I think, you know, it goes blood deep, it goes bone deep, and I think our pride has to come from things that we're doing now and things that we'll be doing in the future, as well as just looking back at the past and then just saying, well, weren't the pirates great or whatever, you know? Wasn't that fun how they used to get people onto the rocks with the lighting fires or whatever? You know, we need to move forward as opposed to just being this picture that people have of us as Cornish, because then we are losing our culture because we're just like stuck in one place and we're just looking back. We need to be looking forwards. I've been told off many times about writing about sad things, bad things, you know, basically that have gone on, about homelessness, about poverty, in my books, because people want Cornwall to be that picture of a cottage with roses and the sea in the background. You know, it's the story of, she worked in London and she came down to Cornwall and she was sad because she'd lost her boyfriend, and then look, a fisherman, and, you know, it's just, I mean, how many times can you write that shit, basically? And that is in all the front of all the bookshops all the time down here, every summer. And I've people have said, how dare you write about Cornwall in the way that you do? And I'm like, well, this is Cornwall. This is the real Cornwall, not that.
And on the converse of that, those stories of middle class escape, whether it's for a holiday or for or to relocate, actually that's hugely alienating for those of us that are actually from here, because it doesn't bear any kind of relationship to anything that I imagine is normal. And this is kind of like a bit of an intangible thing as well, but I've noticed when I have found media from people from Cornwall, it's intangibly different. It's not just subject matter, it's not just it's the way it's kind of put together, and I can't really put my finger on quite what it is, but it is a way of kind of like speaking that says, yeah, this is recognizable. And that other stuff, you know, we can talk middle class migrant and or visitor and all of that kind of stuff, because that's a language that we've learned, you know, growing up around here because you're encountering it all of the time. But seeing other people that are talking us is really rather nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said also, Janie, about research with other rural communities around the country. So do you find that is very similar in places like Cumbria or Scotland or wherever?
I haven't actually done that much within the UK myself, but I did a bit of work a couple of years ago. Actually, I'm going back there again next year. In Appalachia, in the US, and that was absolutely fascinating because there was so many things. There's so many points of similarity about the way that people in urban areas stereotype rural people, and the way that rural people then end up responding to that. And I've got a very good academic friend that worked it's from Norrland, from Umeå in Sweden, and she's found very similar kinds of things that people in urban areas don't really understand what the rural is for unless it's for their own amenity value. Unless it's for nice holidays and leisure time, they really don't understand the point of the rural. Which then that they don't it means that they don't understand the point of rural lives, and so don't value rural lives. And also imagine, part of this kind of like rural story that you see across Europe and across America or the US is that people in rural areas become characterised as being a little bit backward, a little bit shoestrawing, straw chewing, deeply, all rural people that are characterised as being suspicious of strangers and not very inviting and not very welcoming. And yet it was crazy because Appalachia was genuinely the friendliest place I have ever been to. It was actually quite overwhelming. But I was talking to people who were saying about how when they went to college outside of the Appalachians or a lot further north or wherever, and they had, they didn't think they had their hillbilly accent, and yet apparently they totally did. And they were called things like bumpkin and stuff like that. They were really treated quite badly because of the way people imagine them. And I think that's a regularity that you see across rural areas throughout the Western world, and it makes me really cross. And sorry, on a slight rant. One of the things that also makes me really cross is when people move to Cornwall and encounter us and the way that also have this kind of like culture shock thing because they're not used to being in the rural area that much, for that much of an extended period of time, and then take that culture shock. Rather than it being, oh my goodness, I didn't do my research quite so well, it becomes, oh my God, you people are just nuts. You couldn't organise your way out of a paper bag or whatever. And I've heard this ever since I was growing up. It winds me up like crazy.
And when they all moved down here during COVID, and then they were complaining because there wasn't a Costa on the corner of their village or hamlet, that is absolutely the lack of research. They just think the country, and also they don't think of us out of season either. And I write a lot about that as well in my books. The out of season kind of, when it's not sunny and it's not beautiful and you can't live outside, you can't sleep on the beach if you're homeless. My new book, Undercurrent, covers a lot of that. And what we did with that Undercurrent is called A Cornish Memoir of Poverty, Nature and Resilience, which is my childhood and growing up to about the age of about 20. And every chapter we deal with, I talk about myself and my upbringing and growing up in the village on the south coast of Cornwall. And then we will touch on something that's, say, like transport or something like that. So every chapter deals with something that only affects us rural and especially rural poor. So, infrastructure, travel, food, the jobs, because of course the jobs in Cornwall are very low paid and they're seasonal, and it's that sort of thing, tide housing. I had a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of fun with it, but with researching, it was the detail that we went into was incredible, because we have such problems here and people don't realise, because people think Cornwall is rich and sunny and happy and lovely, and of course it's not, because we don't just exist in summer, and also we have such problems with our infrastructure and with poverty and lack of resources, you know. So yeah, it's I talk about like being gay as well. When young people in rural areas don't have access to somebody to talk to, you know, that's it. You just don't. And if you want to get a train to go into the nearest town or city, that costs. So then you might have to ask for that money. And then where are you going on the train? Why are you using that money? Because you want to go to a youth group to talk about, you know. So yeah, it's that kind of thing as well. You know, access to sport. It's people just do not realise how being deeply rural, what effect it has on people and young people. So yeah, I'm really interested in exploring that as well.
Just to pick up on that rural thing now. So rural is defined as like having sort of smaller populations. So in like I've always considered Cornwall as a rural place, like across, despite the towns. Because it feels like there's a rural, like you might live in a village or you might live in a town or you might live in a hamlet. But the connectivity is one of the things that feels like it defines it still as being rural. And someone else I was speaking with as part of this project was saying, well, actually Cornwall has these urban centres of like Drudh being more urban, or St Austell, Truro, Falmouth, say like the towns. I wondered what this is a sort of a subclause on the conversation. If you two could say what you might think about that.
Well, for me, growing up, my school was 10 miles away. So going to school, which was Tor Point, was a 20-mile round trip every day. And when I wanted to do sports and things like that, because we didn't have a car, we didn't have transport, I had to get the school bus home. I couldn't do sport, I couldn't do anything after school. We were deeply rural because of that. We were, you know, we had no public. We had one bus, which was on the weekend on a Saturday. You couldn't go and meet your friends. That's what that is, you know. So for me, growing up, 20-mile round trip just to go to school. And if you missed that bus, that was it, because that, you know, I couldn't. So I had to get that bus. I had to get home. I couldn't stand around chatting to friends. You had to get the bus and get home. And then in our village, we didn't have much. You know, we had a shop and a pub, so that was it.
We had a young farmers club in my village as well, and I understand that was really good fun for some people, but it wasn't something that I was able to be a part of. So very much that resonates with me as well. We were about 4 miles from town, but the weekly bus was a supermarket one. And I remember being really surprised when I came to live in St Dennis, because here there was a half-hour bus service to St Austell or Newquay, and it was like, oh my god, it's a village that actually is connected.
That is uncommon.
Really uncommon. But it has such an enormous impact on the way that you experience the world as well, doesn't it? And about whether, how much you're actually able to take advantage of all of the different kinds of opportunities that there are available for you, because you just physically can't get there. And you do figure out other ways of doing stuff, but the kind of like cultural things that are privileged tend to be the more urban ones, so the kinds of things that are happening in the towns anyway. But so it just becomes a bit more challenging.
I also, there was a couple of things that we touched on there around class and tourism that I'd really like to pick up on. But one of the things around tourism and around sort of protection, a point of protection, I suppose, of culture is now in one of the other podcasts I have a conversation with someone around different kinds of tourism, and they're kind of like tourism where it's looked down on and tourism that is considered acceptable and like good tourism, and these are totally like class connected. So that a package holiday might be considered as bad tourism, that is not interested in culture and goes en masse. And then there's this more privileged, like exploratory tourism, which is a very middle class sort of behaviour, going and discovering something new. So we, thinking about that more, sort of felt like, right, that sort of, actually that middle class sort of tourism is perhaps quite colonial and carries on that thread of discovery and therefore ownership, and that perhaps the sort of package tour tourism provides some protection for the local communities because it's boundaried to an extent. And just thinking about what you were saying there, Natasha, around sort of creating a protection against perhaps those who are coming and visiting Cornwall to take something away from a touristic experience. Is there a benefit there then to the tourism that provides a clear boundary between this is the real culture and this is the culture for sale?
I suppose you're talking about stereotypes then, aren't you? Because you're talking about middle class people who, you know, and I don't think that's true anyway. I know a lot of campsites by us, near where I grew up, in the Loo area, Pulpewa area, which are those people on the holidays en masse. It doesn't mean that they're not indulging in culture and going on hikes and visiting, I don't know, Eden Project or whatever, theatre. And I think a lot of those middle class people, in inverted commas, don't do any of those things perhaps because they literally just go on their boat or their yacht or their friends, or they go to the friends' restaurant and they don't do anything else. So I think for me, tourism has its place, obviously. I think we could do more to make sure it doesn't kind of, you know, overrun certain towns, I suppose. Like I know there's a recent article about people who worked in St Ives, how they felt that it was like a theme park and that they were going to work in a theme park because they were, you know, catering to those people's needs and then going back again to wherever they lived outside of those big fancy towns. So I think tourism has always been here, it always will be here. We complain about them, but obviously we do need tourism. It's not our number one. You know, farming and fishing, I think, is still our number one trade, as it were. And I don't have a problem with tourism, but I do have a problem with second homes, and I do have a problem with that kind of thing that happened during COVID, where people, you know, the long lets. I think that's where the shit has hit the fan, really. Tourism will always be here, and I think it's fine. We need to make sure we manage it, and especially from an eco perspective, we need to make sure that people are not buying the plastic crap, but it's those local shops that are selling the plastic crap that they then leave on the beach. Do you know what I mean? The pretend bodyboards and everything else. We need to stop selling that stuff if we're going to complain about the tourists buying it and then leaving it on the beach when they go home. So it's that sort of thing, you know, and the coastal paths and the state of the coastal paths. I've never known people to run. I walk the coastal path all the time. I've never known people to jog on the coastal path except since COVID, you know. So that's another kind of long-term tourism that's happened in Cornwall, where these people are just coming down and doing what the hell they like. That kind of tourism I don't like. But, you know, there's room for everyone. People need to be more aware of what they're doing. You know, in my book I have a whole chapter on the cost of living during summer months and our local village shop, and how those shops would just sell a boring loaf of bread, and then all of a sudden it would be packaged up in summer to be kind of some kind of artisan special Cornish bakery loaf for 10 times the price. And locals then have to buy that bread. Like in our village, my mum, we didn't have a car, she's single parent. We had to buy the bread that was upped during the summer months, you know, and that still goes on. So we have to do better in our communities as well. to not go, oh, here come the tourists, idiots, here's a loaf of bread for a fiver, you know, and bugger everybody else and push everybody out of their housing during the summer months. And Airbnb, you know, all that has needs to be blamed, but we need to blame ourselves for a lot of the mess that has gone on in the last 2-3 years in Cornwall.
Yeah, it's a really complicated one, and I could go into a slight rant. So if I do, if you want me to finish, please just do some kind of gesture. I've got a couple of stories that I'd like to share actually. The first one is when I was doing my last major research project, and I was asking people about their experiences of living in Cornwall, and there are a wide variety of people, and there's this one woman who had actually grown up in a rural area in the US, but is now living in Cornwall. And she was really thought-provoking, actually, because she was saying about how extraordinary she finds it living in a rural area, that people not only want to come and visit, actually want to come and visit, but also that they go away and buy souvenirs from this place. You know? And it got me thinking about how special it is that other people know about us, not just people in Britain, but also people in other parts of the world know about us. So potentially our visitors could be amazing brand ambassadors, kind of thing. You know, they could have some amazing stuff to take away. But it feels that what we're doing with our tourism offer is we're saying it's precisely this discover your own Cornwall. When we've got our own Cornwall, we'd like to tell people what our own Cornwall is, and share that with them rather than discover your own thing. And the other story that I've got is about a couple of years ago. I was swimming out of Port Quinn, which is a beach that I grew up going to. But I was doing a lot. I do a lot of open water swimming, and we went out of the bay, and it was a really clear day, and we swam to where there's some caves, and it was amazing. And we swam over a wreck, and we swam a little bit further, and there was still a wreck, and then a little bit further still, and there was still a wreck. It was an enormous wreck, and I came back and got straight onto your search engine of your choice. Just to try to find out what was going on or what the wreck was. It turns out that it was a ship that sank. It sank in the 70s, and it gave the Padstow lifeboat an absolutely horrendous time because it was really quite a dramatic a dramatic sinking, but everybody got off, so it was lovely. Anyways, but my sort of searching online for it, everything that was coming up to start out with was discover Port Quinn. You can go sailing and kayaking and coastal walking and eating in posh restaurants, and you can discover all of these amazing things. But what you couldn't discover was local history at all. And I've had that same experience in a couple of other parts of Cornwall as well, where you just look at something and go, oh my God, what is that? I want to know more. But you can't because it takes quite a while. It's hard because everywhere that's talking about this particular place is talking about what an amazing visitor experience you can have if you're quite wealthy. And I think that we need to find a way of developing our tourism offer that says, this is us, these are our stories, come and find out our stories, come and learn about us and learn about our culture. And that actually could be really quite attractive to people, and it would be really quite interesting if we could do that. But where we're at the moment, and I think you touched on this quite a bit, Natasha, as well, is that if you go to Disneyland, I've never been to Disneyland, but I'm just imagining, if you go to Disneyland, you know that it's a performance. You know that Mickey Mouse will go home at the end of the day, take off his hat, and there'll be an ordinary person underneath. And you certainly don't go, do you know what? I'm going to move to Paris because I'm going to live in Disneyland. You can't do that. But what our visitors don't actually understand is that the Cornwall that they experience is a performance. And we're really, really good at that performance, to the extent that people actually think it's authentic, and they actually think that the Cornwall that they get on their week, 2 weeks, however long, is the real Cornwall. And then you've got all of the extra thing about, second homes, etc., etc. And not understanding what it's like here in the winter, or about how appalling the labour market, what low incomes are and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think that we need to fundamentally reimagine what it is that we do. And also, one of the things that also happens is, because people see Cornwall only through the lens of tourism, it also means that the other industries we've got, people just don't notice, don't even know that exist. One of the little stats that I came across the other day that I absolutely love is that one of our absolutely largest employers is not in the visitor industry, is actually a clothing company. And believe it or not, we've got some fabulous clothing companies that do amazing clothes that they sell not just in other parts of the UK, but globally as well. I mean, how fabulous is that?
Yeah, that absolutely. I know Sea Salt is, they're funding actually my event at North Cornwall Book Festival end of this month. And I love that, because for me as an artistic director of other festivals, you want people on board, you want brands on board. And I think, that was really good that they obviously, they're funding a couple of events at North Cornwall, which is absolutely brilliant. But as you were saying about what people look at Cornwall, they just want it how they think it's going to be. So they completely ignore everything else. I don't know how many people visit who don't know what actually an engine house is. Like, they think, oh, that's pretty because Poldark, that's what that is. And they don't even think about our mining history. And our history is so incredible. It's so brilliant. I wrote something on where I live on the Ramehead Peninsula. I don't know if you know it, Kingsand Corsan. But it's a beautiful piece of our coastline up here. And I was commissioned to write it for the BBC. And I had to do lots of research in order to, as you were saying about research, to just get a real sense of the history, as well as the geology and the geography, which I know about, but the history side, and with Devonport Dockyard as well, and all the ships. And, if you walk that piece of land, there's so much that you find that's to do with naval history and that sort of thing. People wouldn't have a clue. You see the plinths where the cannons were during the First World War. That's what I find is interesting to our Cornish history. There's so much, but people don't really want the history. They don't want to go to little villages and enjoy a local celebration unless they're going to Padstow or the Obiors and the things they know. The Flora Dance, Flora Day. They don't want to experiment in other places and see what other villages, because it's going to be more authentic if you go to other towns, villages around Cornwall that aren't the ones that are going to put on an event, because those events have kind of, I think, have been taken over by the English a little bit anyway. They're like, no, this is how this should be, where it's not part of their culture and it's kind of plastic. They just as well put Mickey Mouse hats on, and dance around and sing silly songs while they do. But yeah, it's filtering. They're filtering our culture, I think.
I was just thinking it would be so much more authentic, wouldn't it, if they just had a big sign that says, by the way, this community is a destination, it is not a community.
Yeah.
As long as you know that, all good.
Yeah.
Just touching upon that, like, I also they think about confidence and like the responsibility of, like you were saying, Natasha, the people in Cornwall who sell these things, but also of like our Cornwall Council and other organisations based in Cornwall that manage part of that sort of brand Cornwall image. I mean, I don't feel like I've ever been consulted on brand Cornwall, and I'm Cornish, and I feel like brand Cornwall impacts on me as a person and my identity and how other people in the world understand who I am. and I then have to justify myself against Brand Cornwall. So I wonder about that. It seems as though perhaps marketing Cornwall as a destination seems like an easy route perhaps to follow, and the confidence to promote Cornwall for I don't know, I'm always had trouble with the word authentic, but like with something perhaps that might be considered more authentic, or perhaps like the spine, all the stuff that's going on in the spine of Cornwall. There doesn't seem to be much confidence in promoting that. So, like, whoever manages tourism and brand Cornwall doesn't promote Red Roof.
It's just, I think it's just laziness, you know. It's always hard when you have to not reinvent, but you have to do a bit of research and come up with new stuff, because it's there, and the whole of Cornwall is beautiful, and yet, yeah, it's just it's laziness. I went to Foy a couple of days ago, and there's new signs outside Foy that says Daphne du Maurier country, and for me, being a southeast Cornish maid, I was just like, you know, I love Daphne du Maurier, but that's not Daphne du Maurier. That's just lazy again. People who go to Foy and that area know Daphne du Maurier lived in Bodinick, and she wrote about many places there. You don't have to put these bloody signs up that taxpayers are paying for. You know, the council have bothered to say that. And you get these busloads of people from all over Europe. They come for that. They don't need to see a sign. So that's wasted money. As you say, they could have used that and worked on something in, say, Austell or Redruth or, you know, Callington, which is near me. Nobody knows where Callington is, you know. And there's history there. There's history everywhere.
I think it's this thing about it. I'd be really interested to know how much the people who devise the kind of like official brand, how much they actually understand what ordinary people's lives are like. I kind of feel that there's a disjuncture between people who are kind of making a lot of these strategic decisions and the lives that most of us ordinary people are actually living. And I feel that there needs to be, and this also touches on something. Oh, we've got a hell of a thunderstorm out here, so I don't know. This also touches on something that you were saying earlier, Natasha, about how we need to think about what we're moving forward to in the future. And we need to, you know, it's not just about sort of like the past; it's also about what we are and where we're going. And I kind of feel that there needs to be much more of a public conversation within Cornwall that says, outside of all that lifestyle stuff, because that's fantasy, well, some people's reality, but mostly it's fantasy. Outside of all that, what are we? Where and from where we are, where can we go to, and what are the steps to be able to do that? And I don't, you know, and then we might actually get something that's a little bit more real, or a way of, yeah, all of us being able to move forward together, rather than it being like, oh my God, here's another bunch of people who's talking about us, that doesn't bear any relation to how I experience my life.
Yeah, and another TV show, you know, it's just on properties in Cornwall and come and live the Cornish dream. And everyone's just, you know, on social media, just like, what is this? And yet, you know, it's been and gone. You know, no people will be watching it. None of us were asked about it or to put any kind of, you know, a 2 pennies worth in. Yeah, it's hard. It's an uphill battle, isn't it? You know, it really is.
So another thread that has come up through my conversations is around the kind of ancestors we will be, and being ancestors for the future. So thinking about how Cornish identity continues. I often feel that tourism and some of this lifestyle commodification of Cornish culture does dislocate us and perhaps future generations from Cornish culture, because it's so it's so omnipresent. It's just it's always around us, and how do we unpick on a daily basis, particularly when it's on TV so much, say, oh, that's the sort of lifestyle tourism bit, and then this is actually Cornish culture. Um, how, what do you guys think about that for what we then pass on? What do we set up for the future?
I think, we want a sense of pride, but we don't want people to be like young people. I think both those things need to be kind of mixed. We need to mix things up a bit, because otherwise young people just think of culture and history and as just old people stuff, old stuff. So we want them to kind of get involved in rewriting it a little bit and what their contributions are. We want to celebrate that. I think for me, I hope my books go on, and I hope people will read my books and kind of think about how far, because some of them are a little bit, especially the young adult ones are kind of, I call it justopia because it's like dystopia, but it's just happened or just about to happen. It's kind of in that kind of, if you don't watch it, this is the kind of thing going to happen. Because we'll be the first if there was any, as the weather changes and that sort of thing, like in All Rivers Run Free, Janie, as you were talking about earlier, if we did have more mass flooding and stuff, we would be the last for anyone to really give a shit about, because we are often cut off by weather and that sort of thing. So I think we need to celebrate what young people are doing now, and have them say they're Cornish when they're doing what they're doing, whether they're in music or the arts, is to have some sense of pride that they're not just a young person, or they're not just, in this moment in time, this moment in history, but their identity is a part of Cornwall and history and culture and everything else. Because it's so easy for people to just think, this culture business, and, it's all just kind of old stuff. It's your parents or your grandparents or whatever. Because a lot of Cornish might not have grown up with that as well, that pride, because of that way that English, we're English, and a lot of Cornish just come up with that wrongly, and then their kids. So it's trying to pull those kids back and think, well, okay, your parents might identify as English now, but look at your family history, look back in time, you're Cornish, be proud, own it, and move forward. And it's that Celtic identity as well. And we are a minority, and we are. Not be afraid to say that.
I think it's really interesting. It feels like the Cornish language movement is on a cusp of something right now, where it's being used in a number of kind of like really quite cool ways. And I'm thinking in particular about Gweno, or Gweno's album. That I can't remember what the award is that she's nominated for, but I know it's
the Mercury. Was it the Mercury Award? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And and those things that are like really exciting is like, actually, hang on a minute, it's as if there's a potential for that kind of old Cornish culture actually become really quite cool.
Yeah.
But this isn't just a Cornwall thing, actually. This is a rural, certainly a rural thing in Britain. It would be really, I would love to see some kind of, I don't know, some kind of media about what it's like to be a young person in a rural area. Some kind of storytelling or music or performance that really engages with what rural youth experiences in Britain in general and in Cornwall in particular, because I think that's massively missed out. And so so a lot of the lifestyle stuff, that's actually it's not young, is it? It's not like something that your teens aspire to. It's something that you decide that you're going to be a part of when you're like in your 30s and have played a little bit and now want to settle down and live the dream and things. So I don't know. why is it that when we think about youth and youth culture, we just think about urban stuff? That feels like a really important space that we really need to engage with if we're going to create an authentic, lived Cornish culture moving forward.
Yeah, when I was writing Undercurrent, that's what I was thinking about a lot of the time, is because that book was my growing up. So that was me growing up in the 80s, you know, and into my teens. So it was from a very early age. And the whole time I was writing it, I was thinking, okay, so what is it now? You know, and I did do a lot of research with like the Joseph Rowntree and Trestle Trust, kind of organisations like that. But I really want to be able to talk to young people. So when that book comes out next year, I really want to go into as many rural communities. I want to go to festivals, obviously the usual tour, but also rural bookshops as much as possible, independent bookshops, and with that get involved with local libraries in rural locations across the country, so that we can get young people involved in order to hear their stories, you know, in order to talk to them, and then for them to get them thinking about their lives, and maybe come out with some kind of you know, an outcome that we can all look at and say, okay, these are people we can work with going forward in the next couple of years, you know, because that's really important. We don't ask those questions enough, and it's always, you've got to go, because they have to go to cities often. Like if you're into music, you know, you want to be a sound recordist or whatever, you have to move away. So it's trying to find that balance, isn't it, to get them to kind of to work on what they want to work on, and do as much as they can creative or whatever, but also to not just go and come back, you know, stay here, then work with younger people again, keep it moving forward.
But also to think about the spaces where you can actually do those things. I know, you know, I think one of the challenges that we have is because we're really quite spread out, you know, quite long and thin and all of that kind of stuff. So, but I know that there's, you know, I keep on hearing about how there's some like really interesting, cool and funky stuff happening, usually further down west. It feels like there needs to be more stuff in the
up this end, yeah,
totally, and also around the sort of like Weybridge, Camelford, Bude way as well. You know, yeah. So west of St Austell, that I think, east of St Austell, there needs to be a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot more.
And also people who have the facilities say, right, come in and utilise, you know, why can't the BBC get young people to go into their studios and find out more about recording stuff? This is just obviously an example, but, you know, even art, when we've got such art history in Cornwall, and yet you've got to go to them. And for me, as always, as a writer and as a festival director, is you've got to go to communities, you've got to go to the people, because often people, especially rural communities, you know, they don't feel like they can go into the town and go into a place and take over a space. And it's the same with like theatre or whatever, you know, we need people to keep doing that outreach in order to get people to celebrate and utilise their skills, you know, as creatives or whatever it might be. I think people can do more. I think businesses can do more, definitely.
Maybe there's something in this as well, it seems to me, around those of us who are maybe a bit older, in the prime of our lives, who are being creatives and having a certain moment of privilege and position that allows us to model certain forms of behaviour. So we can model that art from Cornwall doesn't need to be a certain way. It doesn't need to be about roses around a cottage door, or it doesn't need to be about landscape, you know, perhaps a painting, for instance. Things can be broader than that. And we also have the strength of voice to challenge, perhaps, and to kind of ask those questions or demand those provisions of, like you say, businesses and institutions, museums, colleges.
I think one of the projects that I've been involved with quite recently actually is, and again, this is a regularity that you hear across rural areas, but it's particularly present in Cornwall, is the way that because we don't understand what kinds of things there are in our economy beyond tourism, or it becomes very difficult for people to actually understand, what there is outside of tourism. That means that our young people coming through schools don't think that they can have a career doing anything really cool and interesting in Cornwall, because they just don't know that those opportunities are out there. We're not very good at actually sharing what we're actually doing yet. And part of it is because careers education more generally across Britain tends to be focused on, I don't know, so you want to be a sound engineer, be a sound engineer anywhere. Not kind of like, okay, so these are the kinds of skills that are needed in your local economy, and here's how you get those jobs and what you would want to train in and what you want to focus on and that kind of stuff. So we're not sharing with young people what the opportunities are here, whether it's for work or leisure sometimes as well, and then making those opportunities accessible to young people. Then people are feeling like, yeah, well, Cornwall's not for people like me. I'm going to have to leave it. Somebody I was chatting to the other day talks about it in terms of how throughout the experience of growing up, children learn to leave, or learn that you have to leave, rather than that there are these things that you can stay and do things in. And I find it really fascinating having conversations with people. It's that thing when you start getting a little bit older, isn't it? And you're like well into your 40s, and you start chatting to people, and it's like, so what are your kids doing then? And these little tackers that were once really tiny, and now they're like totally grown up. You have these conversations where people go, oh yeah, they want to work in media, they're doing filming, no opportunities like that in Cornwall, so they've had to go. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I don't have a huge pool of creative friends. I do know a bunch of people who have moved to Cornwall specifically to do filming. It's like these are mismatches that need to be brought together, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where there's a lot of space there for representing the narrative of what it is to be from Cornwall, or living in Cornwall, or setting out upon one's life in Cornwall. And each of us, like in our own activities, it feels like is sort of making an effort to sort of be part of the chime that shifts those expectations. There's been some brilliant projects in places like I based in Drudh with my studio, but people like Liam Jolly, who's from Drudh, sort of setting stuff up and doing music stuff and art stuff, and Alice Mahoney as well, who's grown up in Cornwall and setting up projects. So I know that there are these pockets, and maybe we can all do our work in kind of knotting them together. Thank you both so much for all of that conversation and all that thinking. I really liked the way how, as well, whilst we were speaking, Natasha, you'd started off with that connection around Cornwall being like in your bones and your blood, which I 100% sort of connect with. And then throughout our conversation, a big storm has travelled through Cornwall.
It's not here yet.
Is it not got to you yet?
It's getting darker. It's getting darker. Yeah. It's getting darker. Yeah.
You're next, Natasha.
You're going to have to rename this podcast now, aren't you? The storm that's coming. And we're sending it up into England, so
That's it. That sounds like a name for one of your forthcoming books, Natasha.
I've started a new one today because I can't now Undercurrent is with everyone. Like the PDF is going out for quotes and stuff. So yeah, I can't bear waiting to hear what people think. So I'm like, I have to start a new book. So I've started fiction again, which I haven't written fiction for the last couple of years. So yeah.
Exciting.
Do we get a kind of like what's it going to be? Do you know?
It's fiction. It's set on the coast. It's set on the south coast. What can I say? It's not dystopia. It's set after the tourists go home. I'll give you that. So yeah.
Well, I feel like it's really exciting to be chatting with you on the very auspicious and energetic day that you've started a new book.
Monday, start of term, see? It's kind of guilt as well because my partner's gone to school, so I'm like, you have to right, okay, I'm back in my writing cabin out the back. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you both very much.
It's been brilliant. Good fun.
Thanks so much for agreeing to this, Natasha.
No worries.
For inviting us so much.
My pleasure.
And keep in touch, both of you, because we can come up with some great ideas for sure. Yeah, so any ideas, mad ideas, or you want to just get together for a coffee, just let me know. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
Keep the conversation going.
Exactly. Fabulous. Miraz Agas Gosloers. Thank you for listening. Further episodes of the MESKLA Brewyon Drudh podcast can be found on my website, soveberryman.co.uk. That's soveberryman.co.uk, where you'll also find guest biographies and a resource page of links to further reading on the topics discussed. If you feel inspired to join the MESKLA conversation about contemporary Cornish cultural identity, please get in touch with me, Sove Berryman, via my website or social media. You'll find MESKLA Brewyon Drudh on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. The MESKLA Brewyon Drudh podcast and project has been made possible due to a wealth of in-kind help and support from many parties, including the Wenda Perrin Festival, Gorseth Coronet, Cornwall Council's Cornish Language Office, Coethisan Yaeth Canuic, Crescent Coronet, Cornwall Neighbourhoods for Change and Falmouth University Falmouth Campus. The project has been supported using public funding by the National Lottery through Arts Council England, and further funding has been gratefully received from Historic England via Redruth Unlimited. Agas Termin, Agas Quellas. Thank you for your time. See you later.